The United States has dumped UNESCO, accusing the body of having an anti-Israel bias. The US's decision to withdraw from UNESCO goes back to 2011 and the move to grant Palestine full membership to UNESCO. Washington opposes any move by the UN bodies to recognize Palestine as a state. The head of UNESCO called the US's move a loss to multilateralism. Now, France's envoy to the UN expressed regret over the US's decision, saying that America needs to stay committed to world affairs.
It's certainly not up to me, of course, to react officially to the American decision with respect to UNESCO. What I can say is that UNESCO is about promoting our ideals and values through culture, education, and science. These values and ideals are very much part of France's DNA, but also America's DNA. And this is why it is so important to have our American friends on board. I would add now more than ever, as these values are contested and as we need an America that stays committed to world affairs.
WION senior editor joins us live on the broadcast, Surya Gangadhar. And Surya, what's going to be the material impact of the US's decision to pull out of UNESCO?
First obvious conclusion what comes to is that the US does not want to pay the $500 million it owes to UNESCO, and UNESCO has been urging the US to pay up. This has been going on for some years. And secondly, there is this message of solidarity that goes out to Israel, because UNESCO had come out fairly strongly on Israel's occupation of Palestinian lands and all the other issues that are signify the local politics with Israel. So on these two key issues, Trump has decided to pull America out, although US will retain observer status there.
Right, and of course this also forms part of, let's say, the brash statements that have been coming from Donald Trump on the international stage. In fact, at the UNGA too, he said that the amount of money that America provides to the UN doesn't correspond with the other nations' inputs. Do you think that this is only going to work to further isolate the United States on the world stage?
In fact, this is an old complaint that the Americans have made, that they are the biggest givers of money and donors to agencies like the UN, and which is partly true. But there are many other countries contributing, and they also, like for instance, India, for instance, is one of the major contributors for UN peacekeeping missions. The US doesn't send anybody there for such missions. So in that sense, there's always a balance that has to be retained when you go into these organizations. Besides, the US, of course, virtually controls the UN. It has enormous influence there because of its presence in the UN Security Council. So the US is not challenging that control. It only wants to ensure that when it comes to agencies like UNESCO and others, its own commitment is reduced. So it only wants to play where it feels that its interests are at stake. Elsewhere, it frankly couldn't care less.
Which is an allegation sent the US's way quite often. Surya, we leave it at that. Thanks very much for that input.